So let's do a couple examples from chapter 6 and get that out here and show you some stuff that might end up on the exam. So this is the financial planning problems on page 171, which is chapter 6. There you go. So numbers 1, 2, and 3 here, they're all supposed to be easy, but they actually are a little weird because of how interest is being computed here. Now, the main reason this is going to come across a little bit weird is because I would suggest you not using your financial calculator to try to do these problems. They're not really set up to give you the information in a way that easily, directly translates to the financial calculator. So even though we talked about that some last week and we're going to be using it a decent amount in the future, it's kind of iffy right now about, you can do it and I'll show you how, but some of these problems here, 1, 2, and 3, especially 2 and 3, a little bit easier to do if you just kind of take it without the financial part of your calculator. So I'll show you what I mean. So number 1 here, this is for, put that down for a sec. So this is for chapter 6, number 1. Okay. The problem says, Teresa has just opened an now account that pays 3.5% interest. If she maintains the minimum balance of $500 for the next 12 months, how much interest will she earn? Well, the easy way to do this is to say, oh, well, $500 is the amount, and then how much interest will she earn? It's 3.5%, so just multiply the 3.5% times the 500. Now that's the same as doing 500 times 0.035. So if percents and decimals, if you're that kind of math phobic where you're not a fan, you got to kick the rust off on that one. So when I do 500 times 0.035, my calculator gets $17.50. So $17.50. That's the interest she earned. Okay. Now, if you want to know what the account's gone up to, that would be different. Then you would add the original $500 back into this, and the account balance is now up to $517.50. Okay. But the question was, how much interest did she earn? She earned $17.50 in interest. Okay. Now, in the financial calculator, that's pretty easy. Okay. I'll show you what I mean. So if I do like we talked about last week with apps, and then number 1 for finance, and then number 1 for solver, and yes, I'm using this kind of calculator here because it's easier to show you the pieces and all at once, then I would say, oh, well, she earned 3.5% interest on $500. We want to know what that'll grow to in a year. Well, in this case, it's really easy because the 3.5% interest that's quoted in here, there's no other detail given, but when you're quoted interest rates, they're in annual terms. Right? So it says here, held for the next 12 months, but to appropriately do the number crunching on this, you'd have to know that, oh, it might say 12 months, but the interest here that they're quoted is the annual rate. So if I have the annual rate for how many periods? For 1 period, because this is an annual rate. That's the rate of growth of interest in a year. Well, how many years then is the relevant question, not how many months. So I put the 1 in there. I go down. I solve. There's the $517.50, and you would know again that $17.50 of that is interest. The rest is principal. Okay, fair enough. But let's do one that's a little bit different. Let's do number 2. So for number 1, it worked out really easily. Number 2, I say Lisa is depositing $2,500 in a 6-month CD that pays 4.25% interest. How much interest will she accrue if she holds the CD till maturity? It's only a 6-month CD, but it pays 4.25% interest. But here's the thing. The 4.25% interest, it doesn't mention it anywhere in here in the problem, but when you're quoted an interest rate, it's in annual terms, almost always. And so when we do this and we say, oh, Lisa had $2,500, multiply that by her interest rate of 4.25%, okay, then I can't just stop there because that implies that she held it for the whole term of a year because the rate is quoted in yearly terms. So instead I got to multiply by what fraction of the year she held it for, and they tell you 6 months. Well, Well, 6 months is obviously half a year, or 6/12 of a year, half. So when I multiply all this out, I get, just on the calculator here, I say 2,500 times 0.0425 times, and I can do either 6/12 or times a half or whatever. And I get $53.13, 53.125. So the interest earned here is $53.13. Okay. Now, this will be a little bit different if I try to do this one, excuse me, in a financial calculator. All right. Well, how so? Let's go into the financial part of the calculator. It'd be the same way if you were using the other calculator. I'm going to say apps, number 1 for finance, number 1 for solver. Okay. Well, here's the natural inclination when you do this. The natural inclination when you do this would be to say, oh, well, she held this for 6 months at 4.25% interest. Well, okay, we talked about this last chapter in doing the adjustments here. Here's what you'd have to do. You have to say, oh, the interest on, we'll start at the amount, $2,500. Okay, well, that's held for 6 months at 4.25% interest. So the natural thing you might think to do is, like we talked about last chapter, put in, 6 for 6 months, and then 4.25 is the annual rate divided by 6. And then when I go down here and solve, what do I get? Right. I get 26, oh shoot, I'm sorry. So I just made a boo there, right? I did 4.25% interest, but I should have done that divided by, right. No, I'm sorry, that was right. That was the monthly rate. Okay, so I got 2608. Now obviously that's off, considerably off, and that's because of, that's not really the right way to set up the problem. That's because we're acting like the rate there was compounded monthly, and that's not really the case. This 4.25% is compounded annually. Now there is a right way to do this with your financial calculator, which was what was trying to spin in my head there as I was talking it through. There is a right way to do this, but it's probably not what you would expect at first. Right? What you have to do is start with that $2,500 amount right there, and then you would have to say, oh, that $2,500 amount, that's going to grow for 1 6-month period, okay, and the rate would be 4.25 cut in half. Now, alpha, enter. That's where the $53.13 came from. Again, the 255313 matching up with that. Okay, that's where that would come from. Now, how would you know to do that? You wouldn't have. That's why I wouldn't suggest using the financial calculator to do these problems with these short-term CD rates or whatever. The idea here is that this is the annualized rate adjusted to monthly terms, and adjusted to 6-month terms, right? Because if it's 4.25 for a year, it's 2.125 for a half of a year. We just divided it by 2. There's one of those periods, and you can do this. I think it's much easier, though, to just, when you get a problem like this, and you see here on the solutions, these are my Chapter 6 solutions. You see it here, number 2. The easiest way to do that is just take the amount, multiply by the rate, and then multiply by the fraction of a year, okay, if that's what you got going on there. So, and all these will be fractions of a year because they're short-term investments. They're less than a year. They're money market investments. Right, so that's what I would do. And you can do the same thing for number 3. So try number 3 too and check yourself on that. See if you got it right. Let's do number 7 really quickly. So number 7 says here, Dave has $20,000 excess cash to invest. He can purchase a $20,000 T-bill for $19,400 or 2 $10,000 T-bills for $9,600 each, which would give him a better return. Okay. We talked about this a little bit in your slides. It's in some of your homework that you're going to try later, so you're going to want to know that the return, it's important to always know that the return, this is something that arithmetically you've done before in your past, probably even like in grade school or middle school, probably middle school, at the worst high school. You'd say that the rate of return equals the new price minus the old price standardized or divided by the old price. Okay. So if we're going to do for the $20,000 T-bill here, which says, hey, he can purchase it for $19,400. Well, if he purchased it for $19,400, that would be the old price. And then its value over time grows to $20,000. So when I do this, I can just, again, use the calculator here. I'll say 20,000. Now you got to be careful with your order of operations. So I'm going to say minus 19,400, but look what happens. You know, this is the equation. You got to make sure that when you do 20,000 minus 19,400 and then you divide by 19,400, you can't just do it like this. Because if you do, the calculator thinks that you're talking about division right here first. Your order of operations says division comes before subtraction. So when I do that, I get this weird number. Oh, yeah, I lost $1. Okay, this is what you want to do. You want to use your parentheses, or you just know that 20,000 minus 19,400 is 600. Okay, 0.0309. Now that's the rate in terms of what we call proportion or decimal terms. This is also 3.09%. Now if he bought the 10,000, if I bought the two $10,000 ones as well, then what happens? Well, or he can buy two $10,000 bills for $9,600 each. Now hopefully you kind of see what would happen off the top of your head, right? He buys two of them for $9,600 each. That means at the end he would again come out with $20,000. But 2 times 9,600 is 19,200. It's cheaper. So what does that mean? That means that the rate of return he makes is going to be better for this combination where he buys the two $10,000 bills. He makes a bigger rate, a better rate by doing it this way. Now, you can do it by just saying, oh, the new price for each of these will be 10,000 minus 9,600 divided by 9,600, and again here 10,000 minus, and this time I'm not using the parentheses keys, I'm just typing it in, divided by, and I get the rate of 4.17%. Oh, 0.0417, I'm sorry. Got to be always careful with your decimals here too. Yeah. Or 4.17%. Now that's only using one of the two, right? One of the two CDs. It's not going to change anything if you use both. If instead you do both of them together, the two CDs, you would say, oh, well at the end he's going to come out with $20,000. His cost was $19,200, which is just $9,600 doubled. Standardized again by $19,200. You'll get the exact same answer this way. So do 20,000 minus 19,200 divided by, and I really hope I get 0.0417 again, which I do. All right. You can handle that. I promise. That's not anything too crazy. Check your other ones too. Check your solutions. If you got questions with those, come to me and we'll talk about them. But those are some basic calculations that you want to be able to do about how much interest you would make, or alternatively, what rate of return you would make from these different short-term money market investments. All right, that's the last of my YouTube here. Thanks for your time. Good luck in your preparations there as you're getting ready for Chapter 6.